So today we're going to be discussing our three-part series, A Line Manager's Guide in Rocking Grad Onboarding and Development. Now let us just do a quick recap on what the last two videos look like. So we discussed the prep that needs to take place to the 2 to 4 weeks prior to your grad starting, which basically looks at gathering all the collateral from the early talent team as well as the leaving line managers. Secondly, what we also discussed in the previous video, which focuses on the 1 to 2 weeks prior to your graduate actually starting or joining your team, is let's make sure that we have a technical learning journey that is ready for your graduate, right? Let's make sure we also have the quarterly development plan and that you've also assigned a work buddy from your team for your grad. So now, your graduate is finally here. Okay, how excited are we? Okay, so what you need to do is you need to set up what we call a welcome session with your grad and then use that opportunity to introduce your graduate to your team members. This can be simple, right? It could be a simple setup like a coffee session where you guys are just all sitting informally, casually talking. You've already invited your graduate, right, to multiple meetings. You've ensured that their diary is literally packed for the first week. You need to make sure that you're keeping them busy, right? And you need to start making those introductions to your stakeholders, whilst at the same time advising your graduate to take this opportunity to not just observe, but also to take notes as well as to ask questions, right? What you've also done, now that your graduate says, you've also scheduled your first formal one-on-one session, right? I always say the best time is to have it on the first week that they have started in their new stint, right? So you've done the groundwork, right? In preparing for this day, you've done the groundwork in preparing for your one-on-one session. What do you have on hand? Okay, you've got their CV on hand where you've requested from the early talent team. Remember, you have the assessment center and interview feedback, and you possibly also have what we call the psychometric development report. You've also noted down the feedback, right, that you've received from the leaving line manager, and you've also have the technical learning journey in hand. If you didn't have one, you created one, and you've also devised what we call the quarterly development plan. Now, in this first session, it's such a great opportunity for you to really get to know your graduate and to demonstrate some type of commitment to the ongoing development. What you really want to do is you want to get an understanding of what does their current skills sets or their skills stack look like? What do they strengths? What do they consider to be strengths? What are their developmental gaps? And mainly, what is the expectation now that they're assigned to your team in terms of work exposure as well as development, right? You want there to be a psychological contract. And then what are those expectations? What are your expectations, right, for subordinates who work under you? You want to create and establish a clear middle ground in terms of communication style, in terms of accountability, and to give them an idea of what your team culture looks like. Again, like I said, you want to establish that psychological contract in place from the get-go. What you also want to do is you want to make sure that this first session is less formal, right? So do not be too serious, okay? I want you to be interested in your grad. I want you to ask them questions about themselves, also get to know them on a personal basis and get an understanding of, what do their career goals and aspirations also look like. Next, what you're also going to be doing in the session is you're going to be sharing with them their technical learning journey as well as their developmental plan. And this is what you're going to discuss. You're going to discuss what their development, their training, their work exposure is going to look like. Okay, so week 1 is over, okay? And now you need to look for ways in order to accelerate your grad's growth as well as their development, to be able to track their progress, and obviously you need to find ways in which you're going to measure their performance, right? So week 1 is done and you're now with the graduate and you're starting to get into a rhythm. What I want you to start doing is then you would then need to get what we call a bi-weekly update, right, from your subordinates that your grad is currently working under. This is mainly regarding getting an understanding of the progress, regarding the developmental plan, and if maybe you get some performance feedback or even escalations. That's the first thing you want to do as a follow-up. But secondly, your second step is you need to then schedule a check-in session with your graduate at least once a month, and this could literally be a 1-hour minimum session. So I want to talk to you why these are so important, why a monthly one-on-one check-ins with your graduates so important. What you want to do is you want to get feedback on how your graduate is doing, of course. These sessions are very important to your grad. What I did with my graduate is, when I used to manage the graduate program, I would use these color codes during my check-in sessions, and I would ask them, what color are they checking in today? So if they're checking in green, that means all is good, they're in a great mood, energy's up, no complaints, right? If they check in amber, it's basically telling me that I'm coping, but I do have some struggles. So this could literally be a cry for help, right? If they're checking in red, it means I'm not doing well at all. I need your help. And this is where I need to intervene and I need to probe a bit further. What I want you to do is to use these sessions to check up on them personally in terms of their mental well-being and how they're coping in what we call their new role. This session is also your opportunity as the line manager to be able to provide them some type of constructive feedback in terms of, how are they progressing regarding their work performance, but also to give them an understanding in terms of how are they progressing regarding their development. The third step that I want you to do is that I want you to give them enriching and challenging work. Now, when we are talking about the topic of job enrichment, this is how a job is examined to determine how it can actually be made better and more satisfying to the person doing the work. So when we're talking about the topic of job enrichment, I want you to really be intentional in creating work that is rewarding and that matches your graduate skills as well as their abilities, which I feel like is so important. We need to stretch these graduates. Give them some degree of responsibility. Give them some degree of autonomy even in their current work and how they actually execute their work. I want you to also start offering your graduates opportunity to do training and seek out development opportunities that are aligned with their development, right? So that they can continue to advance their technical competences. Now, with that being said, remember, when you work with graduates, try to avoid micromanagement. And I know it's very hard because they're still learning, they don't know what they're doing. But I want you to find ways to increase their autonomy in their work. You need to stretch them. You need to stretch your graduates. You need to push them. You need to challenge them beyond their own comfort zone so that they're able to grow with the support and the necessary resources to ensure their success. What you do not want to do is that you do not want to strain them, which is a huge difference, right? Where you are throwing them literally in the deep end with very little insight, very little resources and support. In this whole process, give them that performance feedback. But I also want you to be mindful in terms of how do you actually deliver critical or even feedback that can be seen as negative, okay? So you need to make sure that your development plan has clear-cut responsibilities. Make sure that you've allocated KPIs for your graduate And lastly, remember, like, being a graduate line manager, it's important for you that you also continue to challenge that graduate, whilst at the same time providing them with a safe space for them to ask questions, for them to feel comfortable taking risks and even making mistakes, with the utmost support provided at all times. Okay? And basically that is it. That is everything you need to know as a line manager to literally rock your grad onboarding as well as your development. Now, did I not tell you that by the end of the series that you would become a more confident as well as a more competent graduate line manager? I did tell you, right? And I'm hoping the series helped you to feel that way, because now I've given you the tools so that you're able to manage any graduate, any intern that comes to your team with the utmost excellence. So here is becoming one of the most memorable line manager your grad will have the privilege to work under. Okay, so now if you've enjoyed the series, and I hope you have, and I hope you've learned as much as possible, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, and of course click that bell notification so that you can be notified whenever I post new content. And as always, I am Olwethu Machine, and I'm in the business of transforming graduate potential into professional